Hello there, welcome to the Joinery Business Podcast. I'm your host, Bruce Poling, and tonight I've got a little bit of a treat for you. We're going to get into some really specific things that you can use in your workshop. We get requests all the time from people who run joinery businesses, and of course, joinery businesses are small manufacturing businesses who really need help learning how to make their factory more efficient. Now, one of the things in our business that we have a high level of skill in, both myself and an amazing coach that works with us at the Joinery Coach by the name of Hamish Campbell, we're what we call lean manufacturing experts. Now, that's not tooting our own horn, that's just a little bit of a skill that we have around how to make manufacturing efficient. One of the really interesting foundations of lean, if you do any Googling or if you do any looking up lean on the internet, you'll find that one of the foundations of lean manufacturing is a system called 5S. Now, what we try and do is we try and take away all the fancy terms and the Japanese colloquialisms or Japanese terms for what lean was. Lean was originally founded in Toyota in Japan, and of course, because of that, it carries a whole ton of Japanese terms that are converted into English. Now, what we try and do is we try and make it all English so that it's not having to be converted into anything. So 5S is loosely translated into English to mean sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain. That's what 5S officially stands for. But what I thought I'd do today is I'd just sort of decode what that actually means and put it into terms that's really relevant to joinery production. Of course, Toyota produces cars and we make kitchen cabinets or joinery or furniture, so how do we make this transition from one to the other? How do we make it relevant and meaningful? That's actually what we do every day of the week with our joinery clients is we work with them across the business, whether it's marketing or sales or whatever, but we also work hands-on in their production to make their production more efficient. It's one of the main things that we do in our coaching business at the Joinery Coach. So I thought what I'd share with you today is a specific example of 5S, what it means, how it's used in joinery production, and I thought I'd dig into some of the specifics of what it is. And again, I'd just like to welcome some comments or some feedback on this. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I've got a little bit of a visual that you can see as well. So if you're listening to this on the podcast, again, welcome to the podcast. Love to have you here listening to it in the audio, and I'll describe it as well as I can in audio. But once you're done here, maybe jump over to our YouTube channel. We'll see a little bit of a clip there as well. Okay, so like I say, 5S stands for sort, set, shine, standardize, and sustain. Now, in most joinery businesses, there is, let's just say, a little bit of chaos going on. I think is a fair statement. There's usually a little bit of chaos. There is organization to be done. There's tools lying around, and it's not unusual for us to have a client join one of our programs and think that they're fairly well organized. But one of the things we quite often will show people is what other businesses look like who have been with us for a couple of years and how organized they actually are. And quite often the difference is so stark. It's such a massive difference between a business that's actually really well organized and a business that just kind of looks organized. So I've got a bit of a visual here showing a client quite a few years ago that was really, really unorganized in their storeroom. And quite often when I get invited to come into someone's shop and have a look around, one of the first places I'll go to is either the lunchroom or the actual storage room where the hardware is stored. The lunchroom will tend to indicate what standards people will accept. Are they keeping the lunchroom clean and tidy? Are the bench tops clean? Is the microwave clean, or is it not? Because I more often than not find that those standards that we find in the lunchroom are the same standards we'll find out in the factory, because it does indicate how people are thinking, what they're accepting around them, and how they generally work. So, but more interesting is the storeroom, because when you go into the storeroom to find your hinges or your glue or your pneumatic nails, or your shelf pins, or whatever it is you're looking for in there. These are actual measurements that we can discover. And many years ago, I was working for a client in Sydney, and the first thing we did is we went into their storeroom, and it was excessively bad. In fact, he didn't want to show me the showroom or his storeroom. But because it is something that I intentionally find on the first day, we went into the storeroom, and there is a picture of it, and it was bad. It was seriously bad. And what we had to do is we had to have a conversation about, okay, it's bad, but what is it actually? How is it actually hurting you as a business by being bad? And the end result was we were measuring the people that were going into this storeroom, and we were discovering that they were taking anywhere from 5 to 8 minutes every time they went into this room just to find things. And there was actually an excessive amount of trips going into this storeroom because things were not stored well in the storeroom, but they also weren't stored at the bench where they were needed. So as we worked with this client over a number of months and got their storeroom tidied up and organized, we remeasured how much time people were spending in the storeroom and how many trips they were making on average per day. And the results were quite surprising. The savings that the savings that we made over the course of 12 months with this particular client was in excess of $80,000. And that measurement, that monetary gain was measured just simply in the reduction of time that people were spending in the storeroom. They went from anywhere from 6 to 8 minutes down to about 15 to 20 seconds in the storeroom. So that time savings translated into efficiency on the bench, which reduced the lead time on jobs. When you take that over the 20 to 25 times that someone was going into the storeroom per day, and reduce the time in the storeroom, but also reduce those number of trips down from 20 to 25 down to 10 or 15 trips per day or less. Pretty soon we have a pretty major impact on this business over the course of the year. And it's really an easy thing to do. We just get into the storeroom, organize things, but we also look at the things that are in the storeroom that shouldn't be there. They should be at the bench, and get really serious about having the right things that you need at the right place you need them, in the right time you need them, and the right way you need them. So that was one simple practice in 5S that we got organized. So that was just an example of how 5S can help, a really specific and tangible example of how in a joinery business, getting things tidied and organized in a systematic way can really help. So when we talk about 5S principles, we're talking about getting an organization to share and be organized and be efficient. We're looking at time savings, and we are also looking at housekeeping. And what housekeeping means is when you make a procedure, let's just say you're making a procedure for your CNC to cut board. There needs to be, in the procedure, there needs to be part of the steps in the procedure to clean up. Because if your process has made a mess, the process should also be to clean up the mess. Many times now, from the old school methods, we would have the apprentice or the shop assistant sweep up after us. When I was an apprentice or a young tradesman, that's what we did. We just left a mess and we let the apprentice clean it up. Well, today it just doesn't make a ton of sense. So if you clean up as you go and you don't make the mess, then it doesn't have to be cleaned up afterwards. And the apprentice can be, rather than being taught how to sweep the floor, they can be taught how to be a cabinet maker. So, your actual process can be very efficient in itself by not creating a mess in the first place. But housekeeping kind of goes beyond that. It goes into everybody having a turn to make sure things kept tidy. So in the lunchroom, if we have to have a roster system for someone to clean the lunchroom, if you do it fairly and right across the team, then everybody has a turn and nobody's being treated unfairly. If you have walkways or those sorts of things that need to be tidied, they can go onto a roster system to say, every Monday or Wednesday and Friday, someone has to clean the walkways, whatever the actual frequency is to make sure it gets tidied. So housekeeping is a really big part of it. Having things in the right place is a really big part of it, and making sure that everything has a place and it's in its place. So when we're talking about the first levels of 5S and the first 3 S's, instead of trying to do an implementation like 5S in a business, which is usually quite a large, involved process, we try and break it into stages, and we usually try and break it into the first 3 S's to begin with, because they're kind of the easiest ones to get gains. So the first 3 S's are sort, set, and shine. Now, number 1, sort, simply means get rid of everything that you don't need. And if you're like me, when I had my joinery business, and if you're like most joinery business owners that I meet, you tend to not want to throw things out. You tend to want to hoard things and keep things. Like you keep that last scrap of board because you know you're going to need it at some stage in the future. Or you've got lengths and lengths and lengths of 80 mil strips of white melamine because you think you might use them at some stage in the future, or whatever it is. I mean, if you were to pause this presentation right now and go out and look in your factory and ask yourself, how much stuff do you have lying around that is actually allocated for an actual job? Chances are pretty good there's going to be a lot of stuff that has either been lying around for a long time or doesn't need to be lying around, and it could just be thrown out. So the first S, being sort, is essentially get rid of everything that's not needed. And how you define not needed is an interesting process. Needed means it's actually assigned to a job right now. Not needed means if you think you might need it at some point in the future, but you're not really sure, you might not need it. And in the beginning stages of implementing 5S, what we do is we sort first. We get rid of everything that isn't needed. Some things can be sold, and some of that monetary value that's possibly retained them can be recovered. But let's be really honest, white melamine is worth less than water. And if you're saving white melamine, the actual labor to go and get it is worth more than the white melamine is. So you're not really saving anything by hoarding white melamine. So the first S, which is sort, get rid of everything. And the more brutal we are with this, the better you are. One thing that I know is true is that people are people, and people kind of react the same way across the board. So if, for example, you come home and the house is messy, it tends to make you feel kind of depressed. And the alternative is true, that if you come home and your house is nice and clean and the dishes have been washed, and if you've got kids, there's no toys lying around and everything is nice and tidy, you just feel this sense of calm and you just feel good about things. That's just how humans react. So if you're in a workplace that is untidy and messy and unorganized, it tends to make you feel bad. And feeling bad means you'll be inefficient and less effective in your job. What we see regularly is businesses that have been operating like this for many, many, many years, and they feel like the way that things are right now, which is unorganized, untidy, messy, is normal. And what normal then becomes is staff and people working in the factory that are not terribly efficient or effective and just a little bit depressed. So it's really important to get this first step done right, because when you create a nice, tidy, organized workspace that's really clear of clutter, you create a happy, engaged workforce. Now, I know that sounds really easy when I talk about it, and it's not as easy to do it, but the result is actually just that the better you get with this, the better the results will be. So that's the first part of 5S. The second part is what we call set. Once you've got everything kind of tidied up and cleaned, and you can actually be really clear on what you've got to work with, and you've gotten rid of everything you don't need to work with, then we want to talk about what you have and where it should be located. So set, or set in order, is the next S. That's number 2. And what it means is we want to set up your factory and create flow and have locations for everything. Now, locations for everything is an interesting topic, because we need to figure out what is the best location for something. And sometimes it's hard to figure out, should it be stored near me, or should it be in a shared location farther away from me, but in a location that's more accessible for everybody. One of the bits of advice I give everyone is to have A, B, and C locations. Now, an A location means that it's within reaching distance of where you're standing. Wherever you work, if you work at an assembly bench, an A location is within arm's reach or within one step of where you are. So what that means is if you need a tape measure, or if you need a pencil, or if you need a screw gun, or if you need hinges or glue, or whatever it is that you need to be using within a step of where you are right now, that's what we call an A location. So when we look at locations for things, you think about the frequency of use of the things that you're looking to find a location for. Find an A location. A B location is a location where you might use something a couple of times a week, but doesn't have to be within arm's reach. So it might be things like shared tools, like a laminate trimmer or a router that could be in a shared cupboard that isn't too far away, but it's a B location that is accessible for everybody that might want to use those things. And a C location is something that you use not very often, and it can be stored a longer distance away from you because you don't need to have it right close to you. So if you think about set in your factory, you can think about A, B, and C locations like that. And we also think about things being visual. And so when you look, if you look at your storage, can you be really clear by looking at it what's missing or what should be in a location on a set of shelves that is blank or is missing something? So it's really important to have visual triggers as to what is missing or what you're low of. And so when you look at your you might have a storage area full of screws or hinges or glue. It should say, if you have bottles of glue on a shelf, for example, it should say glue on the shelf so that when you order more glue, it goes into that location. Or if you're short of glue, you know that that's what's missing. So think about that when you set up your factory. The third S is what we call shine. And shine is just making sure that everything is clean, everything is in good repair. You're not letting things drift, making it look unorganized or a little bit messy. Quite often, shine is also about making sure that the walkways are painted, just making sure that everything just looks up to the standard that you want it to look. So again, the first three S's: sort, set, and shine. And when we work with people to get those three, let's call them standards or systems in place in the business, we actually find that the business becomes much more effective and efficient. And we haven't added any new machinery. We haven't added any new people. We haven't added anything to the mix. We've just come in with a very basic set of requirements that we're going to get rid of everything you don't need. We're going to set up the factory in a nice, neat, ordered fashion, and we're going to keep it nice and clean. And we're going to have it, we're going to have the standard up so that everything is in good visual order and repair. What we find is that once we get that working along nicely, once we get sort, set, and shine working along nicely, then we can take some more advanced steps, which get into the standardize and the sustain part of it. Now, standardize and sustain is something that's just a little bit more advanced, but standardize means that we want to standardize how things are done. And this is also another lean tool called standard work. Some of you would know these as standard operating procedures. Most businesses that I work with don't have any written standard operating procedures. And we've talked about this in previous podcasts, how one of the easiest and simplest ways to get better efficiency out of your production team or your facility is to have written procedures for how you do things so that you will have the known procedure to get a known outcome. So standardize the way you do things so that you'll have a standard result every single time. That's the fourth S. And sustain is basically a focus on keeping it going. And sustain essentially means that whoever your middle or upper management team is that is going to hold your team accountable to these standards that we've just set in place, they have to be the champions of this whole agreement. I would love it if we would just create a perfect system and we wouldn't need to have supervisors or managers in place. And the people in this perfect system would always keep the standard up to where it needs to be, and we never had to manage them or supervise them. I have to tell you that just is simply not reality. And we do need middle management or upper management people in leadership positions to make sure that the standards that are set are kept up to those standards. And that's the sustain part of it. We need to keep the focus going. And there does need to be a leadership element to this that watches across the organization and says, oh, if things are slipping back, they will be able to see it quite visually, because if we create visual standards, we'll be able to see if things have slipped back. Visually, it will not look as good as it used to look. If things are not in their place, if we have a bin that's not in the location that it should be in, and someone should have put it back in the location, it's up to the supervisors, managers to keep people on track. So that's the next level of keeping these things in order, is the sustain part of it. And it is a little bit more of an advanced skill, but sustaining it, sometimes means we've got to have a little bit of accountability right across the team. So That's a little bit of an insight as to one of the, let's call it one of the tools we use to help manufacturing businesses such as joinery businesses get better. We employ a lean tool from lean manufacturing from Toyota. We steal that directly from them, and we use that 5S tool as a guiding principle to getting your business and your manufacturing facility to be a whole lot more efficient. The overriding principles of this are very easy to follow. And if you're interested in learning more, you can Google 5S. You'll get 5 million hits. You can give us a call. I'm happy to chat about what this actually looks like in a joinery business, how it might help yours. Join our hub, the Joinery Business Hub, free Facebook group. You will have to answer 3 skill testing questions before you get let in, just so that we know that you're an actual human and you're going to participate in the group. But once you're in, we talk about these sorts of things, and we help people in the group for free. Or if you want to have a direct chat, joinerycoach.com, there's a way to contact us there. Hopefully this has been of interest to you. It is an interesting topic. I find it fascinating how we can take joinery businesses who have been operating the same way for many, many years and probably feel like there's no next level, and show them what the next 1 or 2 or even 10 levels is. It is a lot of fun on our part seeing the improvements that businesses make when they thought there weren't any improvements to be made. Love to hear your thoughts on this topic and anything else that you would like to talk about. That's all I have for you today. Hopefully that's been of value to you. One thing that I like to say all the time is, if it's interesting, I'm happy, but if it's useful, I'm even more happy, because I'd much rather be useful than interesting. Hopefully this has been useful to you. This is Bruce from the Joinery Coach and the Joinery Business Podcast. Hopefully you have a great day. Peace out.